How do you feel about AI as a whole?
I put a tweet out in 2021 that said it's an inevitability. We can't control the winds, but we can adjust our sails. I think I stand by that.
How do you plan to kind of take Doodles to that higher level of being able to kind of capture a much more global audience?
There's a few components to it. For an IP to be strong, it has to be novel, unique, memorable, and sort of instantly recognizable.
Scott Martin, the co-founder and CEO at Doodles, a Web3 NFT collection evolving into an entertainment and lifestyle brand through experiences, music, gaming, and partnerships.
Now leveraging AI to scale its IP and take it to the next level.
What were the key learnings when working with these big tech brands?
When you're working with big tech specifically, it's important to think about sort of global appeal. And that's not just like, does it look nice, but does it read?
People have these amazing ideas from a creative perspective, but they can't actually bring animation to life. Is this something that you guys see the AI tapping into?
I posted an illustration a few days ago, and that drawing of that level of detail, the stars aligned would take me roughly 3 days to make. That render with zero human intervention took 3 seconds.
What are your guys' main term goals for the Doodles IP in the next, say, for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so
welcome back to the Lock-In or Log-Off podcast, where I speak to builders, creators, and investors to understand how they spotted the opportunity and how they navigated their way to success. Today, we're joined by Burnt Toast, co-founder of Doodles. How's it going, man?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, very nice to have you on. I know this is kind of the early stages of you kind of coming to be more on the camera around Doodles, and I think that's very exciting. I think we've seen a lot of founders see a lot of benefit from that, but I think a lot of people like understanding who these people are behind these amazing IPs and these amazing companies in Web3. So I want to go a little bit further back before we go into the Doodles side of things and understand a little bit more about your own journey leading to Doodles itself. Are you able to give us a little bit of a rundown of what life was like pre-Web3 and pre-Doodles for you?
Life was simpler. Shit, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I mean, I was always the kid who could draw in class. I realized that was a very marketable skill early on. I would sell drawings, caricatures of classmates, and I realized art and business were kind of one and the same, and I've been pursuing it ever since. So but life was simpler and much more monotone. So
what was that life like in terms of, obviously you say like you're doing it in class, you kind of noticed that you had an edge in the creative world. I know the creative world isn't a simple one to navigate necessarily in terms of being able to turn that into business, be successful in that world. What were some of them early learnings of your early like creative career, kind of pre-Web3?
Pre-Web3 or all the way back? Because it's a long journey. I'm in my 30s now, but yeah.
Early career days, like when you kind of first started turning into a business side of things, what were some of those developments and learnings you kind of experienced when trying to be like, okay, I've got a skill, but I now want to monetize this and I want to turn this into a business. What were those, like that stage like for you?
Yeah, I think developing a style and a consistency, like it is quite easy to get bored of your own brand and try to keep doing new things. But I think if you really lock in on a style that's native to your sort of mind and hand, then you can really hone that craft and start. I think companies look at your portfolio and they reach out to you for just that. So if you try and give them something new, though the typical reaction is, "What the hell is this? This is not what we came to you for." So I think consistency and being like true to your style. Also, being true to your style is the best way to be consistent. I had a professor in university that said, style is consistency plus honesty. That really stuck with me because I think, if you're honest with your work and consistently, show up, the style is just, the sort of algebraic result of that. So, that's part of it. And then another part is, I realized that big business, or high level management at these big tech companies, although very accomplished, they're quite mystified by the arts, and there's a real sort of spell you can cast on them, and it's an amazing thing what the arts can do. Google, Samsung, Facebook, all of these companies that I worked for, they use art as a sort of candy coat to make their products more delightful and less terrifying. And I think understanding that is a superpower, and yeah, one that should be used.
Is that's the way I kind of receive that is very much that like seeing art as a new language or a way to communicate these brands in a much more transferable way and more digestible way, because fundamentally they're tech. Not all the time it's beautiful, but art and kind of creativeness can unlock that and tell a story in a much more exciting way. um Out of interest, obviously you've worked for a lot of those tech brands, and you obviously mentioned that this is a great way to transfer that. Specifically, what was it like when you first kind of went and started working for a lot of those larger tech brands? Because it is very different world to probably what's the you kind of grew up on the kind of creative side of things, but going into the tech world and transferring that into storytelling and understanding the how to basically transfer a product into a story. Is that were you a part of that process as well, or where in the process were you primarily involved from like the storytelling and also the creative standpoint with these tech companies?
Yeah, so every journey is a little bit different, and uh, it was cool to see. Okay, so for example, I accidentally branded Facebook dating because I worked at Facebook. I did iconography. They were building out a product, and um, I was sort of in the iconography phase of that. So usually the product was developed, branded, um, holistically, and then I would help sort of build the buttons and tabs, and um, um, that was a huge honor. But one of the icons I built for like one of the surfaces in that platform caught the eye of the senior designer on it, and he ended up using my icon as the high level brand, and it was on the screen behind Zuckerberg at their next keynote, and I was like, I drew that, which is crazy. So yeah, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think it is super organic, and it's amazing to see the art inform the business side of things. And I also was like pretty pretty unorganized, artist type, and once I started working with these big platforms, it was a crash course on to work or on how to work with very serious people with timelines and roadmaps, and so I learned a lot beyond honing my craft about like how these assets and this sort of process is plugged into the bigger machine. So yeah, learned a lot, and added a lot, I hope so.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I think a lot of people, although we all work in a tech industry, there's not we're in a very new, fresh tech industry in many ways. It's not the same as some of those conglomerates and the way that kind of they've achieved their success. You mentioned some of your learnings there, but were there any other major learnings that, like, you kind of once you started working in these tech companies, you really started to develop an eye for, or just realize like how certain things were done on the mass scale that maybe you've now been able to take to kind of go like leading on the doodle side? Were them, yeah, I guess what were the key learnings when working with these big tech brands, even if it's stuff that wasn't necessarily creative? You mentioned like kind of the organization and kind of meeting deadlines, but were there any other key things that you kind of realized from those amazing tech companies?
So my career started from uh, a very young age. My professional career, probably the earliest I can think of, the earliest gig was like designing business cards for like my friend's mom, and it had to please her and only her, sort of thing. So her business didn't succeed, by the way. But when you're working with big tech specifically, or anything that will be shown to the masses, it's important to think about sort of global appeal, and that's not just like does it look nice, but does it read like. So we were working on the updating the iconography for the news feed on Facebook, and um, in Western culture, newspapers are a perfect metaphor. There's no better metaphor to uh, symbolize news, right? But there are places in the world that have never had newspapers. They don't ingest news that way, and that metaphor doesn't make any sense. So it is interesting to think sort of on behalf of the sort of global collective when you're designing these things. There was another project I did for Microsoft. I did a whole, I think, 200 drawings. They were gonna bring back clip art or something. I don't know if it ever saw the light of day, but all of my characters have 3 fingers, like Mickey Mouse or The Simpsons or whatever. That didn't pass their sort of global acceptance department because uh, they said that in Japan, the Yakuza chops your pinky off if you've wronged them or if you've joined. I don't know the ins and outs, but I had to go back and add a 4th finger to 200 drawings. Obviously, that was scope creep, and nobody caught it early on, and I billed them for that. But it was crazy, and I never would have thought of that. But they have departments devoted to that, just to sort of that watch their back. So don't quote me on any of the QZ things if anyone who's connected with them is watching, but that's what they said. And it was very interesting to me that something so simple and so innocent could be perceived as something so not. So yeah, I think that was a interesting eureka moment for me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of so I come from a background. I used to do a lot of marketing, and I used to be more on the European scale, across the different European regions and countries. And even on that scale, you kind of begin to realize the cultural nuances of people's behavior and the way that they digest media or the way they consume it, or like you said, a little bit of the cultural nuances of like certain way the way certain things are displayed. I think it's an interesting thing because Web3 is such a global space. Like you naturally, when you come to market with anything into the Web3 space, you're naturally you're not targeting a specific audience all the time. It's very much, you're pretty much always going global because of the way it's kind of structured. How did you find that kind of early coming into the Web3 side of things? Did you notice that as much when you kind of came to market with Doodles? How did you find the globality of Web3 when you did come to market with the Doodles side of things?
Yeah, it's definitely in the eye of the beholder. Like it is. These sort of things I'm mentioning were not as directly applicable. I think we're more accepting. Also, the world is the internet has really softened sort of restrictions, and I think people's sort of um, uh, sensitivity towards these things. But it was cool to just think about something that was global, and art is in the eye of the beholder. So I mean, I didn't reference that point so directly, but it did change my thinking. Like, I think something about creating a collection and Web3 that is unique is how permanent it is. A lot of things you put on online sort of float to the bottom, the sediment that is the internet. But these things resurface in perpetuity, and they're permanent. So we built this collection on the tail end of COVID, and uh, an exciting trait at the time would have been face masks or something. But 5 years on or 4 years on or whatever it is, those they're almost off-putting, and so I was really thinking into the future with that. I also try to leave any sort of direct references to technology at the time out, because those will sort of date the project. You'll see an old flip phone in a film and you'll go, oh, old film, as soon as you do. So if you want to use something like um, what is it? I can't remember the name for it right now. Something futurism. But yeah, maybe it is just futurism. But they sort of um, it's almost like this, that Back to the Future sort of tech, where it's like a modernized old piece of tech. Yeah, so we do a bit of that, but we try to like avoid a notch in an iPhone or something. So yeah.
Yeah. I think kind of going back to you mentioned when we first started how things are very different to what they were in your previous life, and Web3 comes with quite a level of intensity. did you expect that when you first came to Web3 and started what you did? Like, I think what a lot of people don't see the other side of on like a founding team and everything like that is once you commit to something in Web3, there it's a, like you say, it's a lot more permanent than in any other industry. And if things go badly or things go wrong, it has a much, I feel like it has a much larger impact, or can feel that way certainly. Did you expect, or when you first came in, did you kind of come into the mindset of like understanding that longevity, or was that something that you've kind of realized over time with Doodles?
I had no idea. I was quite green to the space when I joined. I'm very happy I did, but I had a lot to learn. I had no idea the pressure and activity that was on Web3. You know, I was building this thing to look pretty and stand out above or ahead of the other collections at the time. And I think we did a good job at that, but we were. I mean, maybe my co-founders understood, and I just didn't get the message. But um, I'm sure they did better than I did, because Jordan um, was was the guy behind CryptoKitties, and Ev had projects prior to this. But um, I I had a friend, O'Shiny. He was an active member of the space, and he said, "Just so you know, you aren't just building a set of characters. You're building a world and a story, and keep that in mind." And he told me that right before I started, and it sort of rang in my ears the whole time. And I think that little piece of advice really changed the entire collection, and it's made it the incredible ingredient it is today for all of this storytelling. Because NFTs, yeah, they're a collection, but our goal is to build a high fidelity world around them, and bring fandom, bring new audiences. And but if the sort of uh the base collection is sort of a one-note IP, or only has a singular character, it's really hard to build a whole film around that unless you introduce new characters. But ours has such a sort of obtuse range of characters, aliens, cats, monkeys, all these really interesting characters that you can use only the collection to build an entire film.
With that, obviously you're looking to build a high fidelity world and you're trying to build a world around it. How is that achieved? Because obviously we've seen a lot of IPs come to the space, and there's only a few that have really survived the test of time. Doodle's been one of them. Obviously, Pudgy Penguin's been another. Azuki, like there's kind of like a 5 kind of IPs that have really been able to kind of withstand the test of time. But also, we're still in that position of like seeing these IPs be able to meet that standard of growth that I think a lot of people of them kind of had the ambition to see. How do you plan to kind of take Doodles to that higher level of being able to kind of capture a much more global audience? Obviously, you guys do amazing IP collaborations, and I think that's definitely something that has been one of the biggest standouts of what you guys have been able to achieve. It was like one, both creatively, but also the brands that you're working with is amazing. But how do you really take that to a position where like the Web2 audience understand Doodles as an IP in itself, more than just kind of when they see these collaborations, seeing that looks very cool, to understanding it's a brand in itself?
Yeah, there's a few components to it. So I think for an IP to be strong, it has to be novel, unique, memorable, and sort of instantly recognizable. Another piece that's less in our control is just time. I think um, to trust characters like you do your neighbor, even if you've never met them, it's just time. They've been next door for decades. They've never done anything wrong. I trust that they're over there. I think like the 10 biggest IPs in the world are all 30 years old or more. So I think sustaining the brand is a huge part of it. And then, yeah, just being seen organically, being on the McDonald's cups, 110 million cups, I think it was. People might not have registered the characters on that, but next time they see them, they'll go, I've seen those somewhere. The Lil Wayne video, I think, has 14 million views. I don't think people are there to analyze the potato headed doodle characters that are in there. But next time they see them, they will go, I think I've seen that somewhere. And I think it's just layering that over and over. But it has to be an appealing IP to begin with. So yeah, like, I mean, the IP play, it's mentioned a lot in Web3, you know, but I believe Web3 is just a harbor next to an ocean of a super competitive industry. You know, we're up against the likes of SpongeBob and Rick and Morty and all these things. So it's a very serious game. You can win in our relatively small sector and still be way at the back in the bigger things. So at Doodles think globally. How do we compete with the Goliaths? I think we have a real shot at doing that. I know Mike Moon, who was the director of the Spider-Verse. He called Doodles 150-year IP. He has the vinyls in his studio. There's some real sort of iconic heavyweights, cultural heavyweights that back this IP and believe in it. So I think just showing up, leveraging it, and then exploiting the hell out of it until people just can't ignore it anymore.
How do you, obviously, the long game, I think, is something Web3 naturally don't enjoy. The Web3 audience is they love the short term dopamine. They always want you to be capturing on latest trends to kind of capitalize on that, drive revenue, drive growth. And I mean, the fundamental thing is a lot of community members care most about like floor price and stuff like that. How
For sure.
much how much of that do you guys like take in as like, okay, that's a priority to look at? Or is it very much like, okay, every business decision needs to be focused on how do we, like the long term, like how do we grow to become one of the competitors with SpongeBob and everything like that? It's like, how do you decide what signals to take as a yes, like in and not from like the community standpoint, and then making it like a business decision specifically?
Well, there are so many great ideas that come out of the community and from the timeline, and I think good leadership is weighing both. Sort of staying true to the vision, but also being open to having your mind changed. The nature of startups is like this duality of focusing on the right now and the sort of long term, and finding a balance between those two. So you just have to sort of have two sort of mindsets.
Yeah, I think it is a very dualistic world that you live in, building in the space of Web3. But as we kind of go into the more of the doodle side of things in the present, I guess less looking on what the long term looks like in terms of the IP. What does the present look like in the next short term? What are your guys' main term goals for the doodles IP in the next, say, for the rest of the year? What are the main focuses for the brand and for you guys as a company?
Yeah, so we just announced our collab with Fruit Loops yesterday. Massive. I think people thought maybe when I took over as CEO that we had deprioritized partnerships. There was a lull. There's always a bit of a blast radius when there's a change in leadership. You got to recalibrate the team, and reset the vision. And a lot of these partnerships, they take months to develop, especially when you're working with companies the size of Kellogg's. You don't just say, "Can we post this on Twitter tomorrow?" There is a whole process. There's a lot of red tape, but that forces us to uh, really think bigger. And then for Doodles, so I guess we have a myriad of partnerships coming, like Fruit Loops. Super excited about that. That is the sort of short term, right? Like that's like showing that we have it brings affirmation to the space, and it brings eyeballs on the brand, and that's really exciting. Long term, I think Doodles is it's a medium that can sort of traverse all kinds of ways of digesting IP. So Doodles originated by taking advantage of new, wonky, sort of contentious tech, right? Which was Web3. I'm aiming to do that again. We're training an LLM on the last 3 years of all of our work that we've made with Golden Wolf, so that we can proliferate the brand at like a seemingly impossible speed, but it's still studio grade. It's still the doodles you know and love. We see ChatGPT rendering, um, uh, trying to render our characters. They have noses. They don't look right. I'm so excited. I actually have some team members here in Toronto with me right now. We've been sort of around our computers just gasping at how good it is. It's better than I could draw. So I think like there's always, we all know that Venn diagram where it says fast, good, cheap, and pick two. Now we don't have to. We have all three. I think, and this is only sort of the first step towards thinking about what IP looks like in this new era of generation. There is, we can't just take 3 weeks to make a reel and post those on Instagram. We'll go out of business if we do that. We need to be able to talk about the CEO at the Coldplay concert right now, and it needs to look like doodles. It needs to have that storytelling twist. And now we're able to do that. And it's crazy how much better IP performs if you're in the conversation while it's happening. So really leaning towards that, really excited about that. And we're going to build that at the end of our product. Right now we have what we call the Doodle Studio, where you can build avatars and trade traits and everything. But there's really no means to an end, right? Like you kind of just build your character. You might take a screenshot, throw it on the feed and, celebrate it that way, or have rare, make good trades and things. But I think having this exporter tool, being able to bring, to bookend our earlier conversation, that high fidelity world around these collectibles, that's what we're doing here. I'm so excited. 776 has some port codes that align with this, and there's a lot of talk about building films entirely with AI. You can inject your character into these films. This is the goal. So and it's not as far-fetched as it sounds. I mean, a lot of tech will be here tomorrow that we can't even imagine today, but doodles will be positioned to sort of lean right into that. So
yes, obviously we've seen a big gap between like the ideas to actually bringing ideas to life. We see vibe coding bridge that for the coding side of things, of like people having ideas for products can now not have the ability to code, but they can bring that product to life. I see the same gap between ideas and also like creativity, of people have these amazing ideas from a creative perspective, but they can't actually bring animations or reels or short form films to life because they don't have the creative ability. Is this something that you guys see the AI tapping into and kind of bridging the gap for the Doodles IP specifically, but also are you looking to expand the same tech to other IPs?
Yeah, great question. So I agree. There's something called the theory of constraints, which basically says, an example of it is if you have a car factory and you can make 6 doors, 4 wheels, and 1 engine a day. How many cars can you make a day? Only one. You can only make 1 engine a day. That's your max. So what do you need to focus on to be able to make more cars a day, make more engines? Our slowest piece of our pipeline is the art, obviously. These, 2D animation is inherently slow. So I think, okay, so I posted an illustration on Twitter a couple days ago, and this illustration, maybe you can pop it up in the edit or whatever, but it's like a guy standing on a cliff with, looking over a valley with a rainbow river, whatever. That drawing of that sort of level of detail and care on a very if the stars aligned, would take me roughly 3 days to make, start to finish, sketch, vector, color, polish, 3 days. That render with 0 human intervention took 3 seconds. So that is, I did the math, it's 86,400 times faster. If you told me last year that I could make a drawing even 2 times, 3 times faster, I wouldn't have believed you. 86,000 times fucking faster. Like I don't even know. It sounds hyperbolic. It doesn't even sound like reality. So and then you can just hit vary until you see one that's even better. It's unbelievable. And then so I think like there's all kinds of ways we can implement this. I think the meme game is a big one online. Memes, you gotta be first, if not same day, to get these things out. If we're making animations with a sort of 3-week lead time, we have to tell a joke that's funny 3 weeks from now, relevant, topical 3 weeks from now. That's very limiting. You have to, that sort of, you have to make what's the deal with airplane food type jokes, right? So this is a massive change for us in the way that we sort of integrate with culture, and it's also it's amazing for ideation. And then also we have this incredibly charged community that wants to celebrate the art, wants to celebrate their collectibles. They in the past have sort of paid artists within the community to help make gifts and things around their thing, but now I think like we can um, uh, just saturate the internet with Doodle's IP, and it still, you know, passes the sort of sniff test from all of our internal artists. And this isn't about replacing our artists, by the way. This is about freeing them up from this sort of busy work to do, world development, core brand um, sort of expansion that we will eventually feed into the machine. And so it's exciting from so many angles. And yeah, I'm in disbelief.
Is it? I'm super excited to see it come to market. Is it going to be short form GIFs that will be able to generate it? Is it going to be
No.
reels? Can you do a full reel storytelling 30-second video with them? Like, what's the limitations?
Great question. At the moment, so that's the interesting thing about this. This is not an over the counter type of setup. This is a friend of ours, actually the founder of Golden Wolf, has started a new company where he develops these, and so it's a large language model. Sorry, no, it's you'd have to ask him, but it's like a LoRa model that's trained on that can now be trained on footage. So we just put our 20-minute film out last year. That is 30 frames per second times 18 minutes. It's around 30,000 images alone to be added to the data set. All of our short animations. And what this does is it's interesting because you blur the images a little bit to teach it movement. It is text to video. The idea is to token gate your assets, so those will be used as a character reference, and then it's text to video, and it will make 15-second animated clips. And they have this sort of this parallax, this third dimension. They feel very, I don't know if you ever noticed, but The Simpsons went from very flat to very sort of three-dimensional. It feels like the latter. It's really special. This is not just GIFs. This is not just memes. This is studio grade doodles art that is better than I could make. And now I'll just wake up and be an audience to it.
So it's the world of like having a specific VO3 for doodles, but in a higher like level of accuracy. Because obviously VO3 you don't get the same consistency of characters, and I mean VO3 took over all of social media pretty quickly when it came out. But I think the biggest issues with it were like just lack of consistency. You could never get the exact same character in multiple ones, and you couldn't tell the same story. Like people try to tell the skydiving polar bear story, but every time it'd be a bit different, and you don't kind of attach to it as much. Is it along those lines of like the 8-second clips and like really like still full storytelling capabilities with your model?
Yeah. I mean, it was a eureka moment because obviously we saw the sort of uprise of AI, and you start sort of fantasizing about what this can do as a creative company. But we had to wait until it was good enough, because art is obviously the centerpiece of what we're doing here, and we can't bastardize it in a way just for to leverage the brand, because you'll do more harm than good, I think, if you rush it. And I think being sort of the originating artist, I'm probably in a pretty good position to be able to validate this and curate it. And it's to a place now where I'm learning from it. I'm like, whoa, what a smart way to draw that. What an interesting angle. Like this is beyond us now. And we're speaking in September 2025. I don't know where this will be by Christmas. Like every week it's like a new model drops, or it's insane. But I'm so excited about what we can do with this, because a big part of the company is focus, myself included, on sort of fit and finish at the end, right? So we get these
Yeah.
we get these animations from our animators, and then we add sound. We position them in campaigns, or we attach them to a moment. So to take this sort of drink from this fire hose and be able to put this all through this fit and finish it's amazing. So it's replacing large pieces of our pipeline, and yeah, just the fan art's just going to be competing with our in-house outputs, which is sort of hard to imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating world. I think everything, like the level of consumption that people are going to have through AI content, is going to be insane going forward, because you can just have so much more of a curated feed as well. I think there's a danger to it and positives to it with all technology of like, but I won't go into too much of that because it'll be a sidetrack. But how do you curate the risks that come with people making so much content around your own IP? So obviously there's the risks of unethical content being made using Doodle's IP, and that going at a level of scale, which can be just as harmful as it is good. Obviously, already some of the AI models like ChatGPT have good kind of placeholders in place in terms of stopping people doing malicious stuff with it. How do you guys going about that? Is it similar things of having certain guidelines of what they can and can't do, or how you guys kind of protecting the brand from that perspective?
So the data set, if you say, um, it's a great question, by the way. I mean, we're not going to train it on genitals, so hopefully it won't know how to draw them. But I think, like, yeah, the internet. I mean, people are going to use these tools for to to do harm potentially. You'll have your standardized sort of rule sets: no nudity, no violence. There'll be, I mean, yeah, but again, you can always get around these, even with ChatGPT. So it is a bigger problem, and not for Doodles alone to solve. But there will be a function where you can um, mint your generations. But I think that we'll put a layer in where it's sort of uh, an application process. So there'll be an artist in house who sort of vets and says that's not safe to mint. But if they're minted, then they'll be canonized in an official Doodles collection, and they can trade on there, and you will be the owner. So I think yeah, I think it's about putting in sort of safeguards and rule sets. We also are pretty okay, even as like a brand, of taking risks and
Yeah.
killing our characters and stuff. So it's like, I don't know, it is a bigger question, but the internet's pretty I don't even know how you put it. It's hard to control.
Yeah, it is very hard to control, and they're never like with all the AI models. They're like you say, they're already struggling themselves. I'm just more curious if that had been front of mind.
For
The
sure.
other question I have kind of before we wrap up is, what, say someone takes one of their doodles and they build a global IP, and what if there's a world where they build an IP, not like an IP, but they build a brand around an individual doodles that becomes a hit star. I don't know. I'm not familiar, and I haven't looked into enough in terms of the IP rights of your holders between the Doodles team and the holders of the NFTs themselves. How does that work? And what would that look like? Is it a thing that like Doodles team hold all rights to the IP, or do individuals, can they go off and make their thing a TikTok star, get millions of views, and monetize that? And how does that world work, where people start building big businesses around individual doodles through this IP and through this AI generation?
Uh, I'm not concerned about it at all. Our IP rights, I think right now are a little too stiff. I'm looking to loosen those. There's, it's a bit of a debate on like what that does for the collective. If you free it up too much, does it lose value holistically? But I think the risk of somebody building a brand that sort of dwarfs ours is, zero. But I think if these characters, because they're so consistent and so recognizable, if something does go viral, that's wonderful for the brand. I encourage that. And if somebody who bought that asset and took a bet on Doodles wins because of that, then great. So yeah, I'm not losing sleep over any of that.
Okay, yeah. No, yeah, and I don't think it is something to lose sleep over. It's more just curious because, like, there's no doubt, like, you've seen a lot of VO3 accounts blow up, and they can. I do see a very strong world where you're going to see these AI generated accounts have brand deals, and like, because if you build a strong enough personality and it's consistent enough style of content, and you build an audience there, wherever there's an audience of distribution, there's a room for monetization. So it's more just a thing like I see that being an inevitable outcome of like if it's really good kind of ability to create these stories, then there will be people who end up becoming creatives and building amazing brands around them on these different distribution channels. But like you said, it drives overall value back to doodles themselves. It's an interesting world.
For sure, for sure. And I think for us, I think it's cute that we think we can even try to control what this world's going to look like soon. Like it's just insane, and it's a testament to the brand. Like if things go viral, great. Like Justin Bieber posted a doodle on his Instagram. Are we turned off by that? No. It's amazing. So just I think we have this mantra lately that's be beautiful and be everywhere. And I think if people want to march the brand forward, then all the power to them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's super exciting. One question before we wrap it up, and is that you're an optimist or you're a pessimist on AI? I think it's overall quite a hard debate. I think a lot of people have. How do you feel about AI as a whole, not necessarily just for doodles?
I put a tweet out in 2021 that said um, it's an inevitability. Uh, we can't control the winds, but we can adjust our sails. I think I stand by that. I think it's interesting because I'm sort of wearing two hats. I'm the artist who's being put out of work, but I'm the businessman who's leveraging this new superpower. So it's interesting. I I got a lot of heat for being an NFT artist back in the day. A lot of heat. I mentioned that on Instagram, and I got berated with um, just insults. Everybody was allergic to the term. I think we're there again. Really, I think people who are against it will be powerless. I think it's here to stay. So either move with it or get left behind. I really don't think I'm novel in saying that either. Like that is just cold hard facts. So it really doesn't matter how I feel, but I'm excited about it. Um, I've been sort of locked to my desk, ball and chain, vectoring illustrations most of my life, and all of a sudden. The currency now is ideas and taste making, and I think that's the fun bit. And I think like the democratization of creativity is ultimately a very good thing. I really do.
Yeah, I think I'm super excited all around on the what it has closed the gap for in terms of creativity, but also even like products and stuff like that. I think now there's no limitations for if someone it's now, yeah, it's the resources ideas now, and I think that's a beautiful thing because like that is like that at its core is what should be the limiting fact of whether something becomes great and whether something doesn't, and less on the resource side, which I think is beautiful to see. I know we're coming to an end now, so I'd like to kind of ask one question that's kind of non-relevant to the doodle side of things, but that's really what's one resource that has been most valuable to you as a founder, whether that is a kind of a self-development one, whether that is a business tool, just one, a piece of a resource that you found most valuable.
There's a quote from Wayne Gretzky that says, "I skate to where the puck is going, not where it is or where it's been." I think that's a very very important thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're building something. It's not for today; it's for the future, right? So, uh, yeah, that's why we're leaning so heavily into AI, because I see the world changing, and I want to be positioned for the future. So I think keeping that in mind really, it's a strange world. It's hard to give future facing guidance in a world that is like changing by the day. But just to sort of sit down, imagine what you want the company to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Try to imagine what the world will look like, and try to find a way to sort of bridge that gap. But yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to end it off. But yeah, I think overall it's going to be a very exciting end of year, but also future years for Doodles and for everything you guys are doing. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing all the insights. And yeah, wishing you guys all the best when that LLM is, or when the model is live. Definitely let me know, and I'll be jumping straight in to kind of see what
For
I can
sure,
make out of
yeah.
it.
I'll send you a beta link. Thank you so much for having us on. Yeah, we're aiming for. I mean, it's already reaching the timeline. It's already performing well. We're really excited. I'm looking to have this in the hands of our holders before the end of the year. So yeah, updates on that soon. More partnerships, and yeah, thank you so much for all the great questions and for having me on, man.
No worries. Thank you for coming on.